February 23, 1945. Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima. In a cramped concrete bunker reeking of cordite and sweat, Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto crouched over a scrap of paper, pencil shaking in his grip. He was writing words that would have earned him a field execution, had any officer glanced over his shoulder. Outside the firing slit, through choking smoke and the ceaseless hammer of automatic weapons, he had just witnessed an assault that contradicted every sacred truth beaten into him during training. His entry was stark. The Marines are not human. They do not die like other men. Everything we were told about American weakness was a lie. Minutes earlier, 6 Marines had charged his position, directly through overlapping machine gun fire. 3 crumpled into the black volcanic ash. The survivors did not falter. When his comrades rolled grenades into their path, 1 Marine absorbed the blast with his own torso to shield his squad, then fought on with catastrophic wounds until his body physically refused to hold a weapon. The bunker fell within minutes. 21,000 Japanese defenders occupied Iwo Jima, honeycombed into 18 kilometers of tunnels, pillboxes, and mutually supporting strongpoints. They had been promised they would face soft, democratic troops who would shatter under pressure. Instead, they collided with a form of warfare that would annihilate every military assessment the Imperial Japanese Army had ever made about its enemies. The mathematics of this catastrophic miscalculation were not being written in strategic planning rooms, but in the savage intimacy of close-quarters combat that, across just 36 days, would leave 26,000 Marines as casualties. The collapse of Japanese confidence had not begun in these volcanic killing fields. It had been seeded 3 years earlier in a steaming jungle hell that would teach the Imperial Japanese Army a truth its leadership would hide until the bitter end. August 7, 1942. Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, a veteran of the China campaign where Japanese forces had seemed unstoppable, scribbled in his diary after the first week of combat. The Americans who landed are different from any enemy we have faced. They do not retreat when surrounded. They do not surrender when their position becomes hopeless. Most disturbing, they fight at night, as if darkness gives them strength rather than fear. Guadalcanal was Japan's first defensive battle in the Pacific, and Imperial General Headquarters expected a rapid, decisive victory over inexperienced American forces. The 1st Marine Division that came ashore numbered just over 16,000 men. Japanese military intelligence had described Marines as elite troops. Yes, but still Americans. Products of a soft, individualistic society that prized personal comfort over collective sacrifice. Within days, every assumption proved catastrophically wrong. Lieutenant Shigeru Fukudome commanded a reinforced company ordered to retake Henderson Field on the night of August 20th. His unit of 200 men had routed Chinese divisions 3 times their size. They advanced through the jungle in textbook formation, supremely confident that Americans would panic in darkness. The Marines were waiting in, carefully, prepared positions, with interlocking fields of fire. Fukudome's company walked into a geometric killing ground. What happened next defied every page of Japanese tactical doctrine. Rather than hunkering down and fortifying, the Marines immediately counterattacked into the black night, using automatic weapons with devastating precision. Fukudome's diary, recovered after his death 3 days later, recorded his shock. They attacked us in the night. We are the ones who attack at night. They moved through jungle we considered impenetrable. They killed in silence, then vanished. By dawn, 90 men remained from my company. The Americans had suffered 12 casualties. The pattern repeated itself relentlessly across Guadalcanal. Japanese forces, accustomed to enemies who crumbled under the psychological shock of banzai charges, discovered instead Marines who held positions until physically overrun, then fought hand-to-hand with bayonets, knives, and bare fists. Sergeant Kenji Matsumoto, who survived 4 hellish months on the island before evacuation, wrote in a letter intercepted by American intelligence, "We were taught the Americans are individualistic, that they will not sacrifice for their comrades. This is false. I watched a Marine machine gunner continue firing with both legs, shattered until Japanese infantry killed him at arm's length. His assistant immediately took the weapon and continued firing. We lost 40 men to that single position." The Marine training that created such soldiers baffled Japanese military analysts. Private Yamamoto, who would later face them on Iwo Jima, first learned of the Marines during intelligence briefings in 1943. The instructor, a staff officer who had interrogated captured Marines, seemed genuinely disturbed as he explained, "The American Marines undergo training that would be considered criminal abuse in any civilized army. They are broken down mentally and physically, then rebuilt into something that barely resembles the soft civilians who entered. They are taught to view death in combat as honorable, to never surrender, to fight until physically incapable." This sounds familiar. Yes, they have copied our Bushido, but added something we did not anticipate: American industrial capacity. The combination was devastating beyond words. Japanese soldiers, steeped in the code of Bushido, expected death before dishonor, but they fought with equipment increasingly inferior to American weapons. Marines underwent training nearly as brutal as anything Japanese recruits endured, creating warriors just as willing to die. But those Marines landed with overwhelming firepower that made Japanese positions untenable. November 20th, 1943. Tarawa Atoll. Rear Admiral Keiji Shibasaki commanded 4,500 defenders in fortifications. He boasted could not be taken by 1,000,000 men in 100 years. The 2nd Marine Division proved him wrong in 76 hours. Private First Class Tadashi Ogawa, one of only 17 Japanese survivors, told interrogators what he witnessed. "The first wave was massacred in the water. We killed hundreds. More craft arrived. The second wave died on the beach. More came. The third wave reached our positions with flamethrowers. They did not stop until we were dead, or they were. The mathematics were brutal. Nearly 6,400 men died on Tarawa in 76 hours. The Marines who survived had demonstrated they would take any objective, regardless of cost. Documents captured on Saipan in 1944 revealed Japanese intelligence reports describing Marines as shock troops displaying fanatical devotion to objectives. The reports warned, Marines refuse orders to retreat and will counterattack, even when tactically disadvantaged. Casualties inflicted on Marines do not degrade unit effectiveness until the unit is completely destroyed. This clinical classification emerged from systematic study. Captain Yoshio Kobayashi, a Guadalcanal survivor, provided detailed comparisons. American Army infantry tactics are sound and conventional. The Marines operate differently. They advance aggressively, regardless of casualties. They accept casualty rates that would cause any rational commander to halt. This is unprecedented. The speed of Marine operations proved as devastating as their firepower. Lieutenant Colonel Kunio Nakagawa, commanding on Palaleu, had planned defenses based on previous campaigns where American forces paused after landings to consolidate. The Marines never paused. They landed September 15th at 0830 and controlled half the airfield by nightfall. Nakagawa's diary recorded his disbelief. "My defensive plan collapsed because it assumed the enemy would act rationally. The Marines do not act rationally. They act with total commitment regardless of circumstances. This total commitment manifested in ways that seemed suicidal to Japanese observers but proved devastatingly effective." Sergeant Matsumoto, captured on Bougainville, described watching a Marine platoon assault a fortified hilltop position. The approach lay across open ground, swept by machine gun fire from 3 mutually supporting bunkers. Japanese doctrine would have demanded extensive artillery preparation, followed by an infantry advance under smoke cover. The Marine lieutenant assessed the position for perhaps 30 seconds, then ordered the assault with no preparation whatsoever. The platoon charged directly into the intersecting streams of fire. 7 men fell in the first 20 seconds. The survivors reached the first bunker and destroyed it with grenades and demolition charges. 3 more fell, assaulting the second bunker. The remaining Marines took it. The third bunker fell to the last 5 men standing. The platoon suffered 12 casualties out of 37 men to seize a position we considered impregnable. The entire action took 4 minutes from order to completion. This was not mere courage. This was the systematic application of acceptable casualties to achieve objectives faster than we could respond. The concept of acceptable casualties horrified Japanese officers trained to value their soldiers' lives within a rigid calculus of conservation. Marines calculated casualties as the cost of victory and paid that cost, without hesitation when the objective warranted it. This created a psychological advantage far beyond material superiority. Japanese commanders, knowing Marines would accept 50% casualties to take a position, faced a succession of impossible decisions: defend with insufficient force and lose the position immediately, defend with adequate force but weaken other sectors, abandon the position and cede critical terrain. Every option led to defeat. The only variable was timing. Major Yoshitaka Hore, a senior staff officer on Iwo Jima who survived the battle, analyzed this dilemma in post-war interrogations. General Kurobayashi understood that we could not stop the Marines. Our defenses were designed to delay them and inflict maximum casualties. We succeeded brilliantly at inflicting casualties. Over 20,000 Marines were killed or wounded in 36 days. This would have destroyed any other military force's ability to continue offensive operations. The Marines reinforced and continued attacking, without any reduction in intensity. We calculated that inflicting 10,000 casualties would halt their advance for at least a week. They suffered 10,000 casualties in the first week, and their advance never slowed. This revealed the fundamental imbalance. They could replace casualties faster than we could. They had 50 Marine divisions in the Pacific Theater, or training in the United States. We had finite defenders on each island. Mathematics dictated our defeat. The mathematics extended beyond simple manpower. Marines landed with logistical support that enabled sustained operations at intensities Japanese forces could never match. Second Lieutenant Toshio Yamamoto, captured on Saipan, witnessed the contrast firsthand during a nighttime infiltration. I led a patrol to observe American positions 3 days after their landing. We expected to find exhausted troops with limited supplies, as Japanese forces would have been after 3 days of intense combat on a contested beachhead. Instead, we found Marines eating hot food, receiving ammunition resupply by truck, with medical tents treating wounded and rest areas, where units rotated off the line. Their supply dumps contained more ammunition than my entire regiment possessed. They had mobile kitchens preparing fresh meals. They had portable showers and laundry facilities. They were fighting the most intense battle of the Pacific, war and living, better than we did in garrison. This demonstrated that defeating them was impossible. By mid-1944, Japanese military leadership had internalized this brutal logic. Intelligence summaries distributed to garrison commanders acknowledged that Marines could not be stopped, only delayed. One document captured on Tinian provided guidance that revealed a complete abandonment of any hope for victory. When defending against Marine assault, do not expect to hold positions indefinitely. The objective is to delay the American advance sufficiently to enable other strategic objectives. Each day of resistance is valuable. Each Marine killed or wounded is valuable. But understand that the position will fall. Prepare accordingly. Stock positions with maximum ammunition. Create redundant defensive positions. Plan to fall back in stages. Accept that you will likely die in the defense. Your sacrifice buys time for the Empire. There is honor in this sacrifice, even without victory. This grim calculus defined Japanese defensive strategy for the final year of the Pacific War. Defenders no longer fought to win battles. They fought to make those battles so agonizingly costly that Americans might negotiate rather than invade the home islands. Marines, by accepting casualties that would have forced any other army to halt, systematically negated this strategy. They paid the price demanded and continued advancing. No cost was too high. No position was too strong. The offensive never stopped. Private Ogawa, one of the few survivors from Tarawa, later described the psychological impact of facing such an enemy. After the first day of battle, we knew we would lose. The Marines had landed in overwhelming force. They had naval gunfire that destroyed our positions. They had air support that bombed us continuously. But we still believed we could make them pay such a terrible price. They would reconsider future invasions. Then we watched them continue attacking despite horrific casualties. They walked through machine gun fire that killed dozens. More Marines came behind them. We killed them too. More came. We fought for 3 days with absolute commitment. We inflicted thousands of casualties. We died almost to the last man, and the Marines took Tarawa on schedule. They paid the price we demanded and continued their advance across the Pacific. That was when we understood the war was lost. An enemy who will pay any price to win cannot be defeated by making victory expensive. This realization spread like a virus through the Japanese military as survivors from each catastrophic battle carried their experiences to the next. By the time Marines landed on Iwo Jima in February 1945, every Japanese defender knew they faced the most implacable enemy in the Pacific. They knew they would die. They knew the Marines would take the island. The only remaining question was, how many Marines would die with them? General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, arguably the most capable defensive commander Japan fielded in the Pacific, spent months studying Marine tactics and creating defenses, specifically designed to defeat them. He banned the wasteful banzai, charges that had squandered Japanese lives in previous battles. He created a defense in depth that channeled Marines into predetermined killing zones, covered by multiple bunkers. He positioned artillery to deliver devastating fire on the landing beaches. He built 11 miles of tunnels connecting 1,500 cave positions. Every single approach was registered for mortar and artillery fire. The beach was designed as a death trap. 3 Marine divisions, 70,000 men, landed on Iwo Jima on February 19th. Kuribayashi's defenses worked exactly as planned. The pre-invasion naval bombardment barely scratched the fortifications. Marines landed in neat waves and immediately began taking catastrophic casualties. Within minutes, the black volcanic sand was carpeted with dead and wounded. Japanese artillery observers called down perfectly coordinated fire. For a brief, flickering moment, the assault seemed to be failing. Then something happened that Kuribayashi had not fully accounted for, though he should have learned it from every previous battle. The Marines did not withdraw to regroup. They advanced directly into the artillery fire. They found the narrow gaps between Japanese positions and exploited them with savage speed. When bunkers stopped the advance, demolition teams crawled forward under fire to destroy them. When those teams were annihilated, other Marines took their place. The attack never stopped. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto watched from his bunker as Marines assaulted the position to his right. His diary captured the sheer incomprehension Japanese defenders felt. A Marine flamethrower team approached the bunker. We killed the operator. His assistant picked up the weapon and continued. We killed him. A third Marine took the weapon. We wounded him severely. He continued firing until the weapon was empty. Then he threw grenades into the firing ports until we killed him. By then, demolition engineers had reached the bunker entrance. The position was lost. This happened 30 times in the first hour. How do you defeat men who will not stop? The answer, as Japanese defenders discovered across the breadth of the Pacific, was that you could not. The brutal arithmetic of Iwo Jima demonstrated Marine doctrine in its most concentrated form. 70,000 Marines landed. 26,000 became casualties, including nearly 7,000 killed. But all 21,000 Japanese defenders died except for 1,083 who were captured, most because they were unconscious or too wounded to resist. The Marines paid an almost unimaginable price, but they took every objective. Kuribayashi himself, who survived until late March, wrote his final assessment in a message, smuggled toward Tokyo before the position collapsed. The Marines are the most effective fighting force I have encountered. They possess several attributes that make them uniquely dangerous. First, their training creates soldiers willing to accept casualties that would break other units. Second, their firepower exceeds ours by a factor of 5 to 1 in artillery and 10 to 1 in air support. Third, their junior leaders make decisions at squad level that our officers make at company level, allowing them to exploit opportunities faster than we can react. Fourth, and most critical, they never stop attacking. There is no defense that can survive this combination indefinitely. This final point was the psychological cornerstone of the terror Marines inspired. Soldiers could accept being outgunned or outmaneuvered. What they could not comprehend was an enemy that simply refused to stop, regardless of losses. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, who fought on 3 islands before his capture on Okinawa, explained in a post-war interview, "You must understand the difference between Marines and other American forces. Army units would attack, take casualties, and pull back to reorganize. This is sensible military doctrine. Marines would attack, take casualties, and continue attacking over the bodies of their own dead. This is not military doctrine. This is something else entirely." The most feared Marine weapon was not the rifle or the artillery piece. It was the flamethrower. Japanese soldiers trained to die honorably in combat discovered that flamethrowers offered no honorable death. Corporal Takahashi, captured on Okinawa with burns covering 40% of his body, described the psychological impact with chilling clarity. "We were taught to accept death in battle as glorious. Death by bullets, bayonets, artillery. These are warriors' deaths. Fire is something different. You watch flames approach your position. You smell comrades burning alive. You hear the screaming. There is no glory in this death. It is industrial slaughter. This is what the Marines understood that we did not. Modern war has no place for glory. It is about killing the enemy as efficiently as possible, using the best tools available. This realization came too late. Japanese forces encountered Marine tenacity in its most concentrated form during the banzai charge that should have succeeded but failed catastrophically. October 24, 1944, Saipan. Colonel Takashige Takada led approximately 3,000 Japanese soldiers in a final, desperate banzai charge against Marine and Army positions. Japanese doctrine held that such an assault, conducted with absolute spiritual commitment, would shatter any defense through sheer ferocity. The Marines and soldiers of the 27th Infantry Division, positioned in the attack's path, were mostly sleeping when the charge began at 0300 hours. Japanese soldiers poured into the American lines, screaming, bayonets fixed, overwhelming forward positions through sheer mass. Traditional doctrine would have called for a fighting retreat to regroup. The Americans counterattacked immediately. Officers and sergeants organized desperate defensive stands at key positions. They used every weapon available, from artillery firing at point-blank range to trench knives and hand-to-hand combat. The fighting lasted 4 hours. When dawn broke, Japanese bodies covered an area 500 meters deep. American casualties numbered 90 killed and 247 wounded. 3,000 Japanese soldiers died. Private First Class Tetsushi Yoshida survived the charge with severe wounds. His interrogation report captured the shock. "We were told that Americans fear close combat, that they rely on firepower because they are cowards at heart. We charged into their positions expecting them to break. They fought us hand to hand and defeated us. I saw a Marine sergeant kill 7 men with a bayonet and a pistol before he fell. This is not cowardice. We were lied to. The lies extended to every aspect of Marine capability. Japanese propaganda had spent years describing Americans as soft, pleasure-loving civilians who could not withstand hardship. Marines sleeping in foxholes filled with water, eating cold rations for weeks, fighting in 100-degree heat with 80% humidity, contradicted those claims utterly. Japanese soldiers supposedly inured to hardship watched. Marines thrive in conditions that taxed Japanese endurance to its limits. The quality that made Marines so feared was deliberately manufactured through a training's pipeline that broke recruits down to nothing, then rebuilt them into warriors whose identity was inseparable from the Corps itself. Documents captured on Saipan included an interrogation report of a Marine prisoner who explained the transformation to bewildered Japanese intelligence officers. Boot camp is designed to destroy everything civilian in the recruit. For weeks, you are told you are worthless, that you will never be a Marine. The abuse is psychological and physical. Those who quit are publicly shamed. Those who remain learn that surrender is not an option in any sense of the word. But then, the prisoner explained something that had no parallel in Japanese military training. The instructors build you into a Marine. You learn that you are part of something greater than yourself, that every Marine who ever lived is your brother. You fight because to fail is to betray every Marine who has ever lived. This created something unique, fighters who would advance when every rational calculation screamed to stop. The industrial aspect of Marine operations both fascinated and terrified Japanese military analysts. Unlike Japanese forces that relied on spirit and individual sacrifice to overcome material limitations, Marines systematically applied maximum force to every problem. When faced with a fortified position, they did not rely on courage or clever tactics. They identified the position, called in artillery that fired hundreds of shells to destroy it, brought forward tanks with flamethrowers to burn out survivors, then sent infantry to secure the ruins. If resistance continued, naval gunfire from destroyers or battleships would obliterate the entire area. This methodical destruction was horrifying in its efficiency. Second Lieutenant Saburo Endo, an artillery observer on Saipan, recorded, "The Marines landed under covering fire that continued for 3 hours before the first landing craft touched the beach. When they came ashore, every movement was supported by tanks, artillery, naval gunfire, and airstrikes. They advanced slowly and carefully, destroying everything in their path. When we stopped them at prepared positions, they called in battleship fire that literally erased hills from the landscape. They did not try to overcome our positions through courage or clever tactics. They used overwhelming force to eliminate the positions, then advanced. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is industrial destruction applied systematically until resistance becomes impossible. The material superiority Marines enjoyed was staggering. When faced with fortified bunkers, they called in artillery that delivered hundreds of shells in minutes, brought forward Sherman tanks with flamethrowers, and used naval gunfire that could level hills. If that failed, demolition teams would pack hundreds of pounds of explosives against positions. Lieutenant Fukudome, before his death on Guadalcanal, wrote the most comprehensive analysis of Marine combined arms, tactics captured during the war. The Marines do not fight like individual soldiers. They fight like the parts of a single machine. Riflemen fix our position. Machine gunners suppress our fire. Mortars deliver smoke to blind our observers. Artillery destroys our bunkers. Tanks advance with infantry following. Aircraft bomb any position artillery cannot reach. This happens within minutes of contact, coordinated by junior officers using radios we do not possess. We cannot counter this because we cannot coordinate at the same speed. By the time our commander understands the situation and issues orders, the Marines have already moved to exploit our weakness. This speed of execution was possible because Marines delegated authority to the lowest possible level. Sergeants made decisions that Japanese doctrine reserved for captains. Corporals led assaults that required a lieutenant's authority in the Imperial Japanese Army. The result was an enemy that adapted faster than Japanese forces could react. When a bunker stopped a Marine advance, a sergeant would immediately redirect the attack through a different approach while calling in supporting fire, all without waiting for orders from above. Japanese defenders often found themselves fighting enemies who appeared from unexpected directions because Marines had identified and exploited weaknesses before. Japanese commanders recognized they existed. The industrial regeneration of shattered units astonished Japanese planners. Intelligence reports from late 1944 noted that Marine divisions suffered 75% casualties on Peleliu in September, then returned to full strength within 3 months. Those replacements landed on Iwo Jima in February and fought with the same effectiveness as veterans. This ability to regenerate defeated units was beyond Japanese capability. The Imperial Japanese Army had no comparable training system, no replacement pipeline that could maintain unit quality while absorbing catastrophic losses. American efficiency extended to medical care. Wounded Marines received treatment within minutes of being hit. Casualty evacuation by air and sea moved wounded men from battlefield to hospital ship in hours. Blood plasma, antibiotics, surgical care saved lives at rates unprecedented in military history. Japanese wounded often died from lack of medical supplies, from infected wounds, from injuries that American medicine routinely treated. Captured Japanese soldiers watched, Marines who should have died from wounds that would have killed. Japanese soldiers instead survived to fight again. The final humiliation came after the Japanese surrender in August 1945. Marines occupied the home islands, expecting resistance from a population indoctrinated to die rather than submit. Instead, they found an exhausted people grateful the war had ended. Private First Class Tetsushi Yoshida, repatriated in 1946 after recovering from wounds received on Saipan, described his return home. Everything we were told was lies. The Marines did not torture prisoners. They provided food, medical care, shelter. They treated us better than our own officers had. The Americans were not barbarians. We were the barbarians. This knowledge destroyed what remained of our faith in the empire. Thousands of former Japanese soldiers reached similar conclusions. Post-war interrogation reports revealed common themes: a grinding respect for Marine fighting qualities, a corrosive bitterness toward Japanese, leadership that had lied about American capabilities, and a grim recognition that the war had been hopeless from the start because Japan could not match American industrial capacity or the fighting quality of troops like the Marines. The most comprehensive assessment came from General Kuribayashi's final message from Iwo Jima, delivered via desperate radio transmission on March 21st, 5 days before the island fell. He wrote, "I have fought the Marines for 31 days. They are the finest soldiers I have encountered. Their training is superior. Their equipment is overwhelming. Their courage equals ours, and their numbers are endless. Japan cannot defeat such an enemy. We can only die fighting them and hope that our sacrifice buys time for peace. Negotiations that preserve something of our nation. To my fellow officers preparing to defend the home islands, know this: the Marines will come. You cannot stop them. You can only make them pay in blood for every meter of ground. Perhaps if the price is high enough, they will negotiate rather than destroy everything. That is our only hope." That hope died with the atomic bombs in August, but Kuribayashi's assessment of Marines proved prophetic. They were the tip of the spear that broke Japanese defensive lines across the Pacific. They paid a terrible price, with casualty rates that would have destroyed lesser organizations. But they never broke, never retreated, never surrendered an objective. They were exactly what Japanese propaganda had claimed the Imperial Japanese Army was: invincible warriors who would fight to the death before accepting defeat. The final, searing irony was that Marines achieved this through systematic training and overwhelming material support, not through mystical warrior spirit or racial superiority. They proved that modern warfare required both courage and industrial capacity, both individual sacrifice and national resources. Japan had courage. America had everything. The Marines embodied that totality in a way no other American unit matched. Corporal Hideo Takahashi, interviewed in 1975 as an old man, summarized what his generation learned fighting Marines. We were taught that spirit conquers material, that our will to die made us invincible. The Marines taught us that spirit plus material conquers spirit alone. They were as willing to die as we were, but they had Sherman tanks and naval gunfire and unlimited ammunition and air supremacy and medical care and food and all the resources of America behind them. We had our rifles and our courage and promises of victory. That was not enough. It was never going to be enough. The Marines proved that on every island they took. The statistical record is stark and unambiguous. Marines fought in every major Pacific campaign from Guadalcanal in August 1942 to Okinawa in June 1945. They suffered 86,000 casualties, including 19,500 killed. But they never failed to take an objective, never abandoned a position once captured, never gave Japanese forces any reason to believe that Marines could be defeated through superior tactics or fighting spirit. The price was terrible. The results were absolute. Japanese military analysts studying Marine operations after the war reached unanimous conclusions. The Marines represented the ultimate expression of American military power. They combined a warrior ethos matching Japanese, Bushido with industrial resources matching American production capacity. They trained soldiers willing to die for victory, while providing those soldiers with weapons and support that made victory possible. This combination was unbeatable. The lessons came too late for the 21,000 Japanese soldiers who faced Marines on Iwo Jima, or the 30,000 who fought them on Okinawa, or the hundreds of thousands who prepared to fight them on the home islands. Before surrender ended the war, those men knew only that Marines were the enemy they feared most, the enemy their officers could not stop, the enemy who would keep coming regardless of casualties until every Japanese defender was dead. Private First Class Tadashi Yamamoto's final diary entry, written hours before his death in a bunker on Iwo Jima, captured this knowledge with terrible clarity. He wrote, "The Marines will win not because they are braver than we are, not because they want victory more than we do. They will win because their nation gives them everything they need to win, and they will use those resources without mercy until we are all dead. This is the truth our leaders should have told us. We are samurai fighting with swords against men with machine guns, who also have the spirit of samurai. There was never any hope. There was only death." His bunker was destroyed the next morning by a Marine demolition team after a 6-hour battle that killed all 11 defenders and wounded 3 Marines. The position delayed the Marine advance by exactly 40 minutes before being bypassed by other units that continued advancing while combat engineers reduced the bunker. This pattern repeated across Iwo Jima thousands of times. Japanese defenders fought with desperate courage, inflicting terrible casualties, achieving nothing except their own deaths. The campaign ended on March 26th. The final statistics told the story of what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. The object shatters. Against such an enemy, courage was not enough. Training was not enough. Determination was not enough. Nothing was enough except surrender or death. The Japanese military chose death. The Marines delivered it with systematic efficiency. That was the lesson written in blood from Guadalcanal to Okinawa. After the war ended and the propaganda dissolved, Japanese veterans acknowledged the truth their leaders had hidden. The Marines were everything Japan claimed its soldiers were, backed by everything Japan could never provide. Against such an enemy, the war was lost before it began. The Marines proved it completely, one island at a time, at a cost measured in thousands of lives on both sides. And the question that remains, echoing through the black volcanic ash and the rusting pillboxes of Iwo Jima, is this. What does it mean when the enemy's will to fight matches your own, but their resources are infinite? The Japanese soldiers who faced the Marines found their answer in fire, blood, and the sound of approaching flamethrowers. It means that the only remaining variable is how many of your own men will die before the inevitable end. The Marines ensured that end arrived on schedule, every time, without exception.